Okay, I think we're live here, Ajahn.
Okay.
So thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, very happy to be here with you, and it's good to meet you again. And hopefully, we still haven't met in 3D, but someday.
Yes, hopefully before too long.
Yep,
So I'll just introduce you, Ajahn, and then maybe we can have a little conversation.
cool.
So here with Ajahn Kovilo, who first entered the monastery in 2006, received full ordination from Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro at a Abhayagiri monastery in 2010. Ajahn Kovilo spent the next decade training at Ajahn Chah monasteries in the US and Thailand, and completed all Naktams, which are the Thai ecclesiastical examinations in Thai. It's very impressive,
Mm.
Ajahn. In 2020, he enrolled in Dharma Realm Buddhist University to study Pali and Mahayana practices after spending a year in a Pawak monastery. He was the editor of Stillness Flowing and Gold Wrapped in Rags, and the translator of Thus You Should Train Yourselves and Wellbeing Cascade. So, wonderful biography, Ajahn. And I just have to put a little side note in there that I really enjoyed Gold Wrapped in Rags. I think it was actually one of my favorite biographies of the Krupa Ajahns.
So happy to hear that. And of course, like Ajahn Dick was all of it. I just kind of read through it and offered a few, you know, well, lots of suggestions and lots of edits. But yeah, what a fantastic book. Definitely recommend it for everybody. Some spicy, spicy Dhamma. Yeah.
Sadhu. So, Ajahn, I wonder, you started in the Goenka tradition with your meditation. How did you actually come to Buddhism? How did you decide to take that step and start practicing meditation?
Yeah, that's a well, interesting question. So before I went to that Goenka retreat, I was in university and had a gentleman who, yeah, a friend who recommended that I do that, the Goenka retreat. But I was already had started reading spiritual books. Basically, through high school, I wasn't reading much spiritual at all. I was raised Unitarian, which is just a very liberal, mostly American religion of just openness and acceptance of all people, and but wasn't super spiritual into it. It doesn't really have a very clear set of practices to live the teachings. But after high school, I ended up reading more. Had a great teacher suggesting reading the Transcendentalists, so like Thoreau, his experiments on Walden Pond, and Emerson, just very inspiring. These kind of 19th century American back to the land spiritualists who also were influenced by Buddhism. There just wasn't that much translated into English, but yeah, really renunciate role models, early renunciate role models who are just extremely eloquent. Reading their works, becoming more and more inspired, and then also just starting to study all various world religions at university. And then the friend recommended this Goenka course. And honestly, what I thought your question was in the beginning was like, how did you come to Buddhism, after Goenka? Because I honestly didn't realize that the Goenka retreat was Buddhist. For people that have sat those retreats, it is so ecumenically taught that I didn't even know that it was teaching from the Pali Canon. It took me about a year to realize that it was based on the Satipatthana Sutta, which obviously I'd never heard of before. But once I realized that it was teaching Buddhism and specifically Theravada Buddhism, I just became enamored. After that first retreat, it's kind of like I caught fire. It was like a lightning bolt during that retreat. It just totally shifted the trajectory of my life from one of being just a normal liberal American college student headed in the direction of normal liberal American layperson to realizing that the mind could be trained, and that was something which I wasn't getting. The depths of my studies in school were nowhere. It was so superficial compared to what I was learning in that Goenka retreat. So yeah, after that retreat, really started sitting religiously, hour in the morning, hour in the evening. I had only sat maybe 15 or 20 minutes before doing those 10 days. But after that, yeah, religiously 2 hours a day, plus trying to keep the five precepts, which I had never heard about before. And yeah, as soon as I realized it was teaching Pali Buddhism, I started reading anything I could get my hands on. This was in first retreat 2003, and then started reading everything that was available on Access to Insight. Sutta Central didn't yet exist, so uh, read probably read everything, uh, certainly everything that I could translated by Ajahn Jeff from the Pali Canon, and then starting to read things from being inspired by Ajahn Mun. Someone at a later Goenka retreat recommended his biography and realized, oh, this is Buddhism, and it's not just at the time of the Buddhism, at the time of the Buddha, but there are these modern masters. Ajahn Mun had, of course, already passed away mid 1900s, but yeah, these are living teachers, and then reading his translations from other modern masters, and that he himself, Ajahn Jeff, um, was still teaching and was an American monk and was teaching and training other American monks. I thought, okay, that's what I got to do with my life. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
So how did you end up going from being a university student with so much interest to actually taking the steps to ordain, Ajahn?
um, I dropped out. There, there's a kind of in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, this hippie mantra of tune in, turn on, drop out, and it's kind of a revivalist hippie movement in America, and was just becoming inspired by hippie ideals, the uh, electric Kool-Aid acid test, and Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance. And I had a partner at the time who was also at my university, and they were dropping out of school. So I thought, well, okay, now's the time. If they're doing it, I can do it too. And left school, dropped out together, went worked on a farm, and eventually she met somebody else, and that was great because I had dropped out, left my educational scholastic pursuits, and by that time my parents were, reconciled with me having left university. So went full time into Goenka for about yeah 2 years, actually living at centers, sitting and then serving two retreats and then sitting one, and yeah, just left the university and read everything that I could. After I broke up with her, I had time to sit more retreats and to read more suttas full time. While I was on retreat, I had this you know, blazing insight that, oh, it was almost like an epiphany. I know I didn't yet realize I could be a monk, but I thought, okay, I need to get money somehow. How could I do that? And then the answer just appeared to me in a flash of light, like, okay, you could work as a parking lot attendant, like one of those guys who like sits in the booth and takes tickets. And uh, yeah, and I could basically live in a meditation cell and meditate and just take tickets and give tickets and meditate all day and get paid for it. And so that's what I did. As soon as I left the center, I got that job at my local, in my hometown, and I was basically getting paid to meditate. And on my off hours, I was reading offline Access to Insight and listening to every, multiple Ajahn Jeff Tanisaro Bhikkhu talks every day, and more and more inclining myself towards the monastery. So.
Sadhu. It's interesting, Ajahn. We were talking before the interview started about how much I'd heard about you before actually meeting you, because we had some mutual friends. And I guess, after you entered into the monastery, we both went to Thailand for a period. You'd gone a year before me, and then I was going to go after you. And what I remember hearing from everybody who was talking about you going to Thailand, they said he took to it like a fish takes to water. Because I was a little bit nervous about going to Thailand. They said that
Yeah,
that was a quote that you used, that you took to training in Thailand like a fish takes to water. So
yeah.
I'm just wondering about your experience training at the monastery in the United States leading up to your time in Thailand. I mean, you went through
Mhm.
university, were doing a lot of meditation, entered into the monastery and trained there. And then you went over to Thailand and took to it like a fish to water. Can you
Mm.
contrast your experiences in both training as a monk in North America and when you got to Thailand training there? What was it that was so appealing about Thailand? And I imagine there were also many excellent things about training in North America.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you, Bante. Before we started recording, I was saying, gosh, it's so weird to think about anybody talking about me, especially as like a junior monk. But yeah, I really did jump right into Thailand. I ended up ordaining, after my deep dive into Goenka, ended up ordaining at a Abhayagiri monastery, moved there in 2007 and ordained there as a monk in 2010. For one's third year as a monk in a lot of the Ajahn Chah tradition monasteries, you can go, as I think as you did, to go and visit a different Ajahn Chah branch monastery. And some people do that, go to England or other monasteries in America. Whereas I always, from the beginning, I thought um, when I was first realizing, uh, yeah, that there was this living Thai tradition, I thought as I first went to Abhayagiri in California that if it didn't work out there, I would just have to move to Thailand. I just felt this, that's where the real Buddhism was. Um, and yeah, I had already started learning Pali and then started learning Thai while I was at Abhayagiri and got permission from Ajahn Pasno for my third year. I think it probably was 2012, 2013, that I went to Wat Banana Chat, which is uh, the international monastery in the Ajahn Chah tradition in Ubon, Thailand. And speaking of fish in water, it's like the core wat or the practices and daily schedule and chanting at Abhayagiri were just so similar to what it was at the International Monastery in Ubon from my perspective. So I felt like, to continue that analogy, it's like I was going from the aquarium at Abhayagiri to move to a very similar aquarium in Thailand. It's like all the, um, you know, all the little castles and all the little seaweed things were very similar at Abhayagiri. All the structures, the chanting was the same chanting book, similar-ish daily schedule. The one big difference was it was very strictly one meal a day in Thailand, but I had already been experimenting with that, and I was in my, by that time, late 20s. I ordained as a monk when I was 27, but I'd been living in monasteries since I was 23, and always was like wanting to be super hardcore and one meal a day. That felt like the real practice at the time. We still do one meal a day, but at that time it felt like that we had to do that. But yeah, going to Thailand, Abhayagiri does feel like a little Buddhist bubble, a little Buddhist aquarium surrounded by non-Buddhist America. Whereas you go to Thailand and it's a Buddhist bubble with inside of this larger body of water, like an aquarium inside of a lake. It felt like, and just um, yeah, feeling so supported by a culture which, roughly speaking, broad stroke speaking, has mundane right view, that the belief that there is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed. People offer alms every single day, from the poorest villagers up to the king. The king probably doesn't offer every day, but yeah, many royalty do. There is this world, the next world, this cultural belief in rebirth. There is uh, fruit and result of good and bad action. There are beings who have attained enlightenment. These are cultural beliefs which, broadly speaking, people have in Thailand. And I could almost feel that, sense that. And I had already started learning the language, and I became obsessed with learning Thai and felt like it was really good for me. I'm a different person when I'm speaking Thai. Uh, like there's a more, like I feel somehow like freer. There's a sanuk. Sanuk means fun or kind of easygoing, and that's a cultural value. It's a Thai word, and sabai is a Thai word, which is also a cultural value of just easygoingness. And sabai does come from Pali, as do 60 to 70% of the Thai language. There is this historical resonance of Buddhism through the culture, through the language. Sapaya in Pali does have a different meaning. It means that which is optimally suited. So I did feel like Thailand was sapaya to me. And I did feel my heart felt sabai, at ease, when I was in Thailand. And when you can speak the language, you can you kind of connect with people very, very quickly. And I just was able to make Thai friends um, at an astounding rate. And that just made me feel at home. And um, yeah, I do believe it's a faith that I have that there are beings in Thailand who have achieved the highest goal of a Buddhist practice, of have attained arhatship. Um, and I feel like I met them and in some of them, and that's a big reason to learn the language, and it's a big reason to want to be close to the culture. And all of that said, these monasteries in the West, and I'll wrap it up. But yeah, not everybody who comes to a Ajahn Chah monastery in the West has affinities with Thailand. Some might come because they like the oldest Pali teachings, or they like Sri Lanka, or they like Burma. But I had this affinity with Thailand, and I do think that I was Thai in past lives. I don't know how. It's a good story that might explain my affinities with Thai culture and with the Thai language. So,
Mm. And even some of the Kruvajans might tell monks
mm,
where they were. And you touched on an important point, Ajahn. I was saying to Ajahn Nisabo that before I went to Thailand, another monk had come back from there and he was really full of faith. And I thought, oh, I don't know how I'm going to fit in there. I'm not really a faith type. And he was always talking about the Krubajans. And then by the time I came back, I was like, oh, the Krubajans, the Krubajans. So I wonder what your perspective is on interacting actually with the Kruba Ajahns and
mm.
how that had an effect on your practice. And does it continue to still have an effect on your practice?
Yeah, yeah, no, great question. I'm really happy to hear about your experience, and I think it's not just you and it's not just me, but yeah, I think most Westerners. Were you born in a Buddhist family?
No, no.
No. Okay. 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 um, but for us, like convert Buddhists who come to Buddhism as adults, like oftentimes for me, it was through meditation, and I thought, had this kind of Zen-esque idea that all I want is meditation. Meditation is the heart of practice. These expressions of faith are kind of fluff or baggage. So it's not like I came to Buddhism, to monasticism, wanting to show those gestures, but actually, by the time I moved to a monastery, I was seeing the value of that, of faith gestures, and reading the suttas that do talk. It's not just the Buddha who attained enlightenment, but that the Sangha, the noble Sangha, the Arya Sangha, it is possible for a human to abandon greed, anger, and delusion, and to give up the unnecessary mental dukkha um, that is compounded upon just normal human physical dukkha. So I had read that and had enough faith in the suttas, starting with this, it's like this knock-on faith effect. I had faith in the Satipatthana Sutta based on the meditation at Goenka, then started reading other suttas, which I had faith in, and then faith builds on faith. And okay, the Buddha says that it's possible. Maybe it's still possible. I read the biography of Ajahn Mun. Okay, it seems like he has a lot more integrity than I do and wouldn't lie. And he's speaking about these states, implying his own enlightenment. So, okay, why not? I've never met anyone who's done that before I went to Thailand, perhaps. Maybe, although I do have faith in my teachers in America. But yeah, going to Thailand, I had already primed myself to want to believe. And yeah, that does, you know, incline one to want to do the gestures of respect. And when you do the gestures, the bowing and just holding your hands in Anjali when you speak to someone, it almost does like forcefully, it's like a wedge, you're opening up the heart in a way. And yeah, just sitting quietly, especially with Lumpur Liam, honestly, the abbot of Wat Nong Papong. I had experiences, yeah, I wanted to believe, and going there, I had experiences which I can't say I fabricated myself. It was a somewhat reliable experience that I would get within, 10 feet of him, 15 feet of him, and I would feel this, like the mind would naturally kind of boom, coalesce into this coming back to my mantra, to a Buddha mantra. And it's almost like I didn't even, unbidden to me, it was like a grace. I see him, or I come within his orbit, his sphere, and like my mind responds to that in a way which wasn't based on my own overt acts of will. So it's like, wow, this is strange and fascinating. And just to see someone who almost, the art, artistic drawings of halos, which you see in many different religious traditions, certainly in Buddhism as well. Like I feel like I can see a halo, an aura around Lumpur Liam. You know, the inner light just shines out from his face in a way which is almost like the shadow. You don't see shadows because the light is coming from him. Um, and yeah, being very close to him, he's the most like open. His upataks or attendant monks are like extremely close and living with him, 18, 20 hours a day, attending to him. So, the Buddha said one way you can judge a teacher is to stay with them, and not just for a short time, but for a long time, and observe them in different environments. And um, I could do that to some extent with Lumpur Liam and other teachers. Lumpur Pasno, I've been with him in uh, lots of different environments for on and off for the last 15, 17 years. And these are inspiring people on many levels and continually inspiring. So um, yeah, it does inspire faith. It's caused by faith, wanting faith, and then it's like a faith spiral. The faith feeds in on itself. It's like a faith, a saddha echo chamber, which I do still have that faith, and not, we're up here in Seattle and don't have daily exposure to Thai Kruba Ajahns, um, but yeah, I do still have faith in Sangha. I've got faith in Ajahn Nisabo and my friend monks, Kalyanamitta, people who are trying to do good, and the level of Arya Sangha. I do believe it's still possible, and hopefully we can invite enlightened teachers to Seattle someday too, so other people can feel that, taste that flavor.
Mm, sadhu. It seems like something that, like a fruit you haven't eaten, you have to taste the flavor in order to really understand how good it is. And
I like that.
yeah, just wondering, Ajahn, a big part of our practice is trying to learn to transform our minds, trying to learn to transform our behaviors. And you touched upon something that I find really interesting, which is that the presence of other people, even without them saying anything, can somehow incline the mind in particular directions. Now, I'm wondering, are there any ways that we can open ourselves up to another person that we have faith in, such that we're able to take on their good qualities more easily um,
Mm.
than we otherwise would be? I know that as somebody who has a lot of faith yourself, has spent time with the Kruba Ajahns, um, trying to imbibe a little bit of that sweetness and take it home with
Mm.
one is going to be important. So
Mm.
I wonder if you have any insights into that, Ajahn.
Yeah, I think it is possible. Like faith might just, fall upon some people, but also there are steps one can take to kind of tending the garden. You set the soil in a good place, and the seed of faith can take root. But one quality is suvacha, which is a virtue. It's a Pali word, and it's a virtue which we don't really have a good equivalent for in English. It means being easy to speak to, or being easy to admonish, and um, being easy to give feedback to. The Sutta on Inference, Majjhima number 15, is one that's great. And um, certainly, it's easy to, uh, if one has like starry-eyed faith, um, like a real moist faith, um, that's one thing. But to have a sustaining faith which maintains one through a relationship, like a living relationship with Ajahn Pasano, for instance. Yeah, he was my preceptor. Have lived on and off with him, been his personal attendant since 2007, and um, yeah, it's an enduring faith, and part of that is making myself suvacha. So if he has feedback, trying to make myself easy to speak to, easy to give feedback to, and yeah, because if I don't, if he, tells me like he has, there was a period when my mouthfuls of food were too large, and he called me out on that. And so something very kind of not apparently so deep, but um, he can give me that direct feedback, a very somewhat funny example, but for me not to push up against him or to not get angry, but to actually be willing and ready to softly receive that kind of feedback is great for enduring faith, because, okay, he's gaining faith in me that I can receive his feedback. Um, yeah, and just Yeah, maybe it is possible. I think just that in my mind, the basis of saddha, and it's a fascinating word. Dha is the root for not just saddha, but dharma as well. And it means to hold. It's the root which means to hold or to place. And sad means heart. So it's literally the placing of the heart. And the foundation of Theravada Buddhist faith, and just saying for anybody who might watch this, but is how I conceive of it. It is possible to abandon unwholesome mental states, and it is possible to cultivate wholesome mental states. That's from Anguttara 1 or Anguttara 2.25 or something. But that's a very, yeah, just rational uh, psychological principle to take. But when you have that as your root of intellectual faith, it does kind of soften the heart and kind of tint, prepare the soil of the heart that, okay, maybe people have done that better than me. And um, yeah, I think you said it very well that we are so influenced by the people who we associate with. That's the first and second of the Mangala Sutta virtues, is not associating with fools, associating with the wise, honoring those worthy of honor. And it is the case that it is like walking through a cloud or walking through fog. It's that even if we don't intend for our clothing to get moist, like at Abhayagiri especially, you're in the valley during a time of fog and your clothes are just going to get wet, even if you didn't intend it. And similarly, we become like those who we associate with. So, yeah, choosing wisely, and you can make your clothing and the heart more permeable, susceptible to that fog influence, that good influence, if you're open to it.
Thank you for sharing, Ajahn. And I'd heard also another thing many times about you, Ajahn, was that you were a faith type. And
Mm,
reading through and looking at your biography and some of the things that you've done, I mean, you have this inspiring quality of faith, but you're also
mm,
very studious. So
mm,
you've also spent a lot of time studying at the Dhamma Buddhist University, and
mm.
you've also spent a lot of time studying Pali and Sanskrit. So I'm wondering, do these two qualities complement each other? Or do they balance each other out? Or is one, how to say, like, one that you cultivate to take a little bit of break from the other and then come back together? Maybe you can speak a little bit more about the interaction of both this intellectual side of the mind that you used to
Mm,
study and this heart
yeah.
side that one generates faith with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's interesting to think about myself as a faith type. I mean, yeah, we're actually, haven't told anybody this, but we're interviewing Sam Harris later this week. And he's kind of famous as being this new atheist. He wrote the book, The End of Faith, actually. And he wrote, the um, a lot of books kind of questioning blind faith and the moral landscape. He's written yeah, Waking Up. He's got an app, and a lot of people who are skeptical types actually are really drawn to his writings. And honestly, I love his writings, and I feel like it's a lot of his writings because I'd say that my faith is not it's not kind of a sloppy faith. It is based on what I feel are good reasons and in good objects. I'm not going to I'm not going to place my heart, this saddha, in an object which I feel hasn't warranted that. So all of my intellectual pursuits are hopefully in service of my curiosity about Dhamma. Like I have spent so much time learning Pali and Thai because there's good fruit in it. I see my heart softening. Like I learned so much from the Pali Canon and from Thai people, from Thai Kruba Ajahns, from teachings that are only in Thai. And that's why I've studied. And one of the main, the way I learned Thai was through a way of studying called spaced repetition, which is kind of like um, flashcards on steroids. So I've done, probably tens of thousands of flashcards for Pali and Thai, but one that I reviewed every single day was basically priming me. It's like, may this study of Thai um, lead me to growth and development in the teachings of the Buddha. So this was priming myself to learn Thai because I wanted to grow in Dhamma and to grow in faith. So I think that's really useful. It was in Thai ขอให้การเรียนภาษาไทยนี้ทำให้การฝึกเจริญในพระธรรมยิ่งขึ้น something like that. So reading this priming principle to get me to want to learn Thai and to want to grow in Dhamma. Um, and it did, living in Thailand, anybody who's done it for a while, there's anywhere between 200, 300,000 monks in Thailand, 30,000 monasteries. Not everybody is going to be a Kruba Ajahn worth placing your heart into. And it's easy. Before training my heart in faith, I was training my heart as most Western intellectuals do, most students, certainly most or all PhD candidates, which I wasn't. You're training your heart in fault finding, your capacity to draw distinctions and to get better at seeing how I'm right and the other person is wrong. You're getting better than that and training yourself in that. So it's very easy. I was very grateful for Lumpur Pasano at one point. He said, and I felt like he was talking to me, but he was speaking to a group. He said, it doesn't take that much intelligence to find fault. And I was like, whoa, because I realized that I'd been training, like feeling like that's the gold standard for intelligence is my capacity to draw fine-tooth distinctions. But to be a slave to that, to be a slave to my fault-finding compulsion is slavery. It is bondage, and it's not wisdom. Fault-finding is not wisdom. So to being able to exercise faith when it's warranted and being able to exercise intellect where that's useful. These are both two not at all non-overlapping heart skills that should be developed. Because the Buddha said himself, don't place your faith solely in one person. The Buddha says this, don't do this because they might die or they might disrobe or your faith might change. So yeah, I'm not placing my faith totally in Thai or Thai Kruba Ajahns or in Pali or even Pali Buddhism. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to learn from these things. And um, yeah, trying to get better at both faith and the capacity to see distinctions. These are both useful skills.
It sounds like you're describing a type of confidence, John, that's backed up by investigation, so that
Yeah,
it doesn't go off.
thank you. Yeah,
And
good phrasing.
I remember actually another thing that I heard about you, Ajahn, from all the things that I heard about you when before we met are coming out a little bit. So another thing that I heard about you was that when yourself and our mutual friend, former Ajahn Saleko, were all living with Ajahn Jayasaro, he would give all the monks kind of individual names, like he's the foremost in this, he's the foremost in this. And I
Mm.
heard that you were the foremost in being methodical. That's what former Ajahn Saleko had said, that Ajahn Jayasara
Okay.
had given you the title foremost in being methodical. In other words, you had different methods, different ways of
Mm.
breaking your time up.
Mm.
And I know that you started in the Goenka tradition, this kind of very strict retreat schedule, and moved on to the Thai forest tradition, which I've read you described as kind of like a low simmer, like being, the typical daily life is like having a pot on the stove on a simmer. So just being simmering.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if
Mm.
you can give any advice about some methods or techniques or approaches that we can use to break our time up in such a way that it's used most efficiently, that it's used best for us to achieve
Mm.
our goals in the Dhamma.
Mm. Yeah, that's humbling. I'd never heard Ajahn Jayasaro said that, but I do hope our mutual friend, ex-Saleko, Kalam, I hope he does watch this. He does still pay attention to Dhamma, and he was the one who probably one of the first people to talk about you as well. But yeah, I do value being methodical, and certainly my study of Thai and my study of Pali was quite methodical. I mean, I was spending 8 hours a day when I was living at Wat Nanachat studying Thai in different ways, spending maybe 2 hours reading the Thai chanting book, and then spending another hour to 2 hours on my spaced repetition, flashcards on steroids, way of studying, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours on listening to Thai. So it was very methodical in that, and I do value it. I mean, one of the three kind of virtues of the Sangha is that it's they are Nyaya Patipanno, which is translated, I think, in our chanting as those who practice. Um, I forget how it's translated, but Nyaya means method. It's those who practice methodically, um, or yeah, with a method. So I value that. I do think that um, it is a part of practice. You know, the one of the books that you said that I had put together, which I did with my monk friend and Ajahn Suhajo. He did the typesetting, and I put it together. It's called "Thus You Should Train Yourself," and it's a collection of every instance in the Pali Canon where the Buddha says "Evan hivo sikitabang," which means "Thus you should train yourself." And the Buddha uses it in different suttas, and it's a level, it's a different way of speaking than our Vinaya rules. So we've got 227 main rules, and as you know, tons and tons of auxiliary rules, which the Buddha said we need to take on as monastics. But the Buddha also had this way of enjoining, or specifically almost suggesting ways of prompting oneself, priming oneself of, thus you should train yourself, quote, I will be one who possesses hiri ottappa, conscience and fear of wrongdoing. I will be one who possesses, who practices moderation in eating. I will be one who practices devotion to wakefulness, etc. And so put together, pulled them from, the five Nikayas plus some Vinaya quotes, this phrase, and organize them according to the gradual teachings. And it's available online. Anybody can download it. It's in Pali and in English translation, ordered according to that gradual training as it occurs in Majjhima 39, the Maha Asapura Sutta. And yeah, it's a great training. And I will read all of those in quick succession. I've restarted that practice every morning. I'll reread it. The book looks like this. This is the second edition, which is a slightly different book, but it looks like that. And there's about 70 different trainings in there. And yeah, would suggest people make the time. For me, another great book in terms of being methodical is the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, where he gives 4 different ways to make your wholesome habits really stick, and that is to make them obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. So OAES, always. You always want to make your good habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. So that's what I did with my Thai study. I had a notebook where I was taking track of how many hours I was spending doing this, and I've got the notebook in my pocket all the time, so it's obvious, and I know I do it. I check it multiple times a day. You want to make it easy. Okay, it's super easy to just listen to some Thai Dhamma. It's on my MP3 player at the time, and okay, it's ready to go. It's ready to cue. Um, Obvious, attractive. Yeah, just thinking, priming myself with that first flashcard that remembering why I'm studying Thai, why I'm studying Pali. It's to grow in Dhamma, and satisfying. Okay, with this spaced repetition system, or Anki, which is a digital version of it, which I use now, anything, if you follow the algorithm, whether it's the manual flashcards or an online app, if you do the study every single day, you will memorize anything that you put into it. It's just a matter of time if you do the study every day. So that's what the method is. So yeah, be methodical in your training. And as you say, the slow simmer of living in an Ajahn Chah monastery, um, it is like that, and I think it works for a lot of people, and it's good for me. I did live at a Pa'ak monastery where it is 10 hours of meditation literally every single day, and that's good. And I'm glad I was able to train in that. And we go on when we do have our periods of the year when we do more formal retreat. We'll simulate that as well when you're supported by a group of people also meditating, when you're methodical about your meditation as well. That's very useful, but also all the intentional structures of an Ajahn Chah branch monastery, or hopefully any place that you or I will want to live, almost certainly also have different structures that we either create or are already existent, and really praise that for anybody who wants to go deeper with their practice. Yeah.
Mhm. Sadhu. And I know that you started in the Goenka tradition, which is very methodical in terms of the way that it approaches meditation, and also spent time at Pawak, a Pawak branch, which also has a methodical. It is methodical, but I think somewhat less so, a little bit more flexible in some ways. I was reading a description of a retreat that you were going to give, and it was talking about how if we just apply meditation too strictly as, say, like a method, then our practice can become kind of like grim, or it can become kind of dry. And I know that you've trained in different meditation methods, and also I think I've seen a photo that you sometimes sit Zen retreats or have sat some Zen retreats as well.
Mm.
Is
Mm.
that's what the photo looked like?
I have sat through Dharma Buddhist University. I sat some Chan retreats and Guanyin recitation retreats as well. Yeah.
Mhm. And so what I'm wondering is, how do you balance, like, what's your approach to using all these different techniques? Do you sometimes adopt one that feels appropriate for the moment and then go with that? Or do you like take your experience with these techniques and then alter them according to the situation?
Mm.
Or is it some other way of approaching them? I'm curious to hear your advice on how
Mm.
to work with these techniques and also to work with the instructions that we get in the slow simmer of the Ajahn Chah and the Thai
Mm.
forest tradition to learn to use your discernment and to learn to be creative.
Yeah, I really appreciate that Ajahn Chah influence, and certainly Lumpur Pasano's influence is very much not technique centric. One of my early monastic role models was named Sanyamo, and he had a great simile. I was really praising and talking about how I, as a very junior monk or trainee at a Baigiri, saying like I missed my time at the Goenka retreats, the structure of that. And what are the differences, I asked him, between Goenka and the Ajahn Chah tradition? And he said, well, the Goenka tradition is kind of like traditional boxing. You know, you've got clear rules. You can punch. You can't punch below the belt. You can't lean up against somebody on the side ropes. I'm not a boxer. I don't know all the rules, but something like that. Whereas the Thai forest tradition is more like no holds barred. You know, you can put somebody in a headlock. You can kick them in the head. And he said similarly, it's like the Ajahn Chah tradition is no hold bards against the kilesas. So figuring out what works for you. And the Buddha, there's a sutta which is fascinating, which someone asking the Buddha, I hear that you uh, praise all ascetic practices. Is that true? And the Buddha says, no, I praise those which, when they're practiced for an individual, lead to increase of wholesome dhammas, wholesome mind states, and decrease of unwholesome mind states. And similarly with any practice, he said, if when you do it, wholesome mind states increase and unwholesome mind states decrease, then you can take on that practice. And I certainly saw people in the Goenka tradition and have known people since that technique itself, watching the breath at the tip of the nose, watching sensations as you scan through the body, practicing metta in the way they suggest, their life, their conditions, their mind streams are enough that they can flourish within those windows. Similarly with the Pa'ak tradition, saw some monks who were radiant with the depth with which their practice of the Pa'ak system could just bring about flourishing and warmth in their own hearts. But for myself, neither of those really landed in that way. Um, I still practice both of those in my own way, but today my practice is very idiosyncratic. It's very Kovilo specific. I think there are principles which I can, speak to, and I still pay attention to the breath, but I use various mantras at different times depending on what's coming up. In the uh, Maharahulovada Sutta, Majjhima 61, I believe, or 62, the Buddha is talking to Rahula. And Rahula asks, he says, uh, Buddha, Father, teach me about mindfulness and breathing. And the Buddha does eventually do that, but his initial response is to teach him 21 other meditations that weren't the breath. And he doesn't even say he's going to do this. Rahula asks for advice about how to practice breath meditation, and the Buddha teaches him to practice with the 5 elements to make the mind like earth, like water, like space, to practice asubha, or recollection of that which is unbeautiful, recollection of the 4 Brahma Viharas, and several other meditations. And then he teaches him breath meditation. And for me, having this whole tool belt is really helpful. I think one of the things which expanded my mind from the Goenka retreat was Ajahn Tanisara's essay, One Tool Among Many, where he talks about specifically the Sabasava Sutta, Majjhima number 2, which is a whole tool belt. You've got ways of practicing by developing, which is what, or by abandoning, or by using, or by uh, even destroying, which are destroying thoughts of sensuality or ill will or harmfulness or cruelty. So I do find that my mind is mind stream is complex enough that having a whole set of tools is useful for me to really be honest with myself about what comes up through the course of a day or through the course of my life. I need a lot of different tools, and yeah, so I could keep going, but yeah,
Yeah,
long answers.
it makes sense, Ajahn.
Mm,
And I'm just curious about this concept of practice becoming grim because,
mm.
as monks, you can see if you approach things the wrong way, actually you can become a little bit grim, like a little bit a little bit,
Yeah.
too hardcore, whatever it might be. And you were mentioning something interesting about Thai culture that, it's very sabai, and I can't remember the other word that you mentioned, but
Sanook,
very
Sanook,
a lot of happiness
yeah.
there. Sorry, what was it? The
Sanook,
other one?
fun. It's fun. Sanook.
Right. And
Yeah.
we as monks, we hear about these rumors of monks in Thailand. I mean, they sit down to meditate the first time and their meditation goes really, really well. And then,
Mhm.
monks in the United States or Canada or other Western countries, they're, putting in a lot of hours, they're putting in a lot of effort, but their meditation doesn't seem to go or progress as smoothly.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you have any insights into, say, like, what's the difference between the way that monks practice in Thailand that allows them to be less grim, more playful, and seemingly their meditation goes better, versus the way that we practice in the West? And if there is a difference, if it's something that's useful to take on, what can we do to change so that we can maybe take on a little bit more of that joy in our own life and our own practice?
Cool question, Bante, and I think really useful for practitioners, especially those of us who weren't born in a Buddhist culture, to think about, or to examine within ourselves. You talk about the grimness of mind, the mind which is basically dry, the heart which is dry. Uh, so the Thai word yim means to smile. So Thailand is called the land of smiles. So you've got a practice which is grim and a practice which is yim. And yeah, I didn't totally realize I was doing this, but yeah, becoming more and more interested in Buddhism and reading the biographies of Ajahn Mun and seeing pictures of Webu Sayadaw and Mahasi Sayadaw, all the pictures of them are no smiling, no smiling, and that's the norm in at least classical Burmese photography of monastics. And I was getting this perception in my mind that the real true practitioners don't smile because we see the grimness of samsara, So I almost took on this view that it was best that I was being the real true hardcore practitioner by not smiling, by being as serious as possible. And it just went off. I had ideals about what a monastery would be and what a good monk was supposed to be, but really it was all just cartoon collage of different ideas about Christian monasticism that I picked up from who knows where, and then a picture of one monk here, and then not being able to speak Thai or see other photos. There are videos of Mahasi Sayadaw smiling. Certainly Lungta Mahabua, there's videos of him laughing, Ajahn Chah, him just looking radiant, and living teachers, like any living teacher that I would want to live with, has, an emotional spectrum. They're not just they're not just non-smiling. There is a place for sincerity, and there's always one can say sincerity is a through line, but sincerity doesn't mean grimness. Sincerity doesn't mean non-smiling. And going to Thailand and meeting just pure monks, monks who are my years in robe or younger, who are just normal people, normal, well-adjusted people, but it's just who love the Dhamma, who could smile and not be weird about it. And then meeting Kruba Ajahns who are just internally radiant, and whether or not they're smiling or not, and not to idealize or fetishize smiling. There's nothing inherently, yeah, I mean, one can fake smile, but seeing these Kruba Ajahns smile, seeing Ajahn Pasano smile, it just warmed my heart and made me realize. And honestly, there was a period when I just was religiously not looking in mirrors. It is uh, it is one of our rules as monks that we don't look in a mirror. But I think I hadn't realized after a number of years how kind of contorted my face had become in trying to uh, put on the face of a quote unquote real practitioner. And yeah, one day after 4 years in the monastery, and people getting aversive reactions, which you do get from somebody who's a cartoon monk just trying to be the most serious monk, the most gang awesome monk in the monastery. The face is contorted and it's ugly, and you know was getting enough mirror from the people around me, and eventually looked in a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw, and it's like, okay, I got to soften my practice and remember how to smile, and just normal that yeah, a Buddhist can smile, and it's a beautiful thing when the smile that comes from a well-trained heart. So yeah, encourage people to look at that. Are you taking on a view that being grim, consciously or unconsciously, being grim, being serious, is a badge of honor? And to open your heart and watch videos of Ajahn Chah and his radiance and his capacity to just be the most Upasaka Gi Nanayon wrote a book called Normalcy, where the arahants, that's the only true normal person. And yeah, an arahant can smile. An arahant has the full, yeah, healthy range of emotions. Can smile, can be serious, and yeah, I can do that as well. So hope that's something.
Hmm. Yeah, and Ajahn, I was reading a quote from, I think, the beginning of one of your, or inside of one of your books. It's the Cascade of Joy, I believe it's the title is. And
Well-being cascade. Yeah,
sorry, the Wellbeing
right.
Cascade. That's right, Wellbeing Cascade.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I think in there, just paraphrasing the quote, you had been listening to a talk of Longpo Pasano where he said that people think they have to meditate really hard and then get happy, but then instead you should basically make yourself happy, and that happiness will build and influence your meditation. So
Mm,
just wondering, I mean, what are some of the things that we can do practically to build up that happiness in our life and then have
mm.
it penetrate into our meditation?
Yeah, great question, and so much gratitude for Lumpur Pasano to point that out. Yeah, he would say that a lot. People think once I get my concentration together, then I'll be happy. And that's certainly that was my modus operandi in my early monastic life. Once I get my concentration together, then I'll be happy. Whereas he says, but the Buddha says, and that's what this book is all about, the well-being cascade. The Buddha says, actually, once you get your happiness together, then concentration will be a natural result. In this book is every time in the Pali Canon when the Buddha does talk about this well-being cascade. He gives this simile of just as water, from a cloud, rain cloud, would fall on the top of a mountain and fill up the pools at the top of the mountain, which would then overflow and fill up the next reservoirs, would fill up. Then they go to the streams, into the rivers, and then eventually into the great ocean. So too, one who cultivates certain wholesome dhammas will give rise naturally. One doesn't even need to make an effort. One doesn't, once, when they're making the effort to do these wholesome qualities, one needn't wish, may this give rise to well-being. But well-being, pamboja, is the first pool that then spills over into piti, which is rapture or joy. That then fills up and goes to kaya pasadi, or bodily tranquility, which fills up and leads to sukha, which then fills up and leads to samadhi, which then leads to nibbana eventually. So this book is organized around, I think, what I call the five treasures. The Buddha calls them that as well, the panchadhana, Dhana, or treasures, of the different ways that we can seed that cloud, that rain cloud, and lead to well-being, or pamoja. And those are through faith. So we talked about faith a bit already, placing the heart in healthy objects of faith, and leaning into that. Our sila, or keeping moral precepts, really making friends with other people who keep precepts, and picking up that cloud moisture from the people around us. You do pick up and learn from the people around you if you're open to it. And the Buddha did praise, if you want to get better at sila, then go and associate with and learn from and read about and ask questions of people who are already established in virtue. And also, let's see, study. So sutta, and there's a great sutta where the Buddha talks about 5 vimutti ayatanas, or spheres of liberation. And one of them is samadhi, but the other ones, and these are 5 ways that lead to pamoja, or this well-being. One of them is samadhi, but the other 4 are ways of studying Dhamma. You can gain well-being or joy into samadhi by thinking about the Dhamma, or listening to Dhamma, or reciting Dhamma, memorizing Dhamma, or even teaching Dhamma. These are all bases of liberation. These are all paths to pamoja, or instigators of this well-being cascade. And also wisdom practices and generosity. Generosity is another way to prime or to seed this cloud. And you see it, in any religion, someone who's, or non-religion, these are, it's not just a Buddhist stronghold that you need to do Buddhist generosity or only Buddhist virtue to be able to give rise to well-being. You'll see it amongst you if you become sensitive to it. And part of Buddhist training is sensitizing yourself to see the beauty of generosity, the beauty of virtue, the beauty of healthy learning and study, the beauty of faith rightly directed. You can see it, and it does lead to well-being. It leads to well-being. It leads to brightness. It leads to that aura, that halo. So those are some of the different paths to pamoja, paths to well-being.
Sadhu. And what you said there about sensitizing the mind was interesting, Ajahn. Lately here in Australia, I've been talking. The Buddha discusses trading a lower happiness for a higher one, and sometimes it's not always easy to see that what is a lower happiness or what's a higher one, because sometimes higher happinesses have like this upfront difficulty or pain associated
Mm-hmm.
with them. I'm
Yeah.
wondering how this process of sensitizing the mind can lead us to develop more wholesome qualities, can lead us to develop joy, and how that can carry over to give people these experiences that they're hoping for in their meditation. Many people are hoping for samadhi, they're hoping for
Mm.
peace in their meditation. How can this
Yeah.
process of sensitization help them to achieve those goals, or to get some of what they're looking for from their practice?
Mm. Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. I think Ajahn Lee Damadaro, one of Ajahn Thanissara's kind of grandfather teachers, gives this simile of a practice being like a ladder. So before, we're learning these different, this ascending ladder of happiness and well-being. But there come a period when you do, as you say, it's Dhammapada 290, that if by abandoning a lesser happiness, a more coarse, a more harmful happiness, you gain a more refined, a more subtle, a less harmful happiness, then the wise person, having their sights on this higher, more refined happiness, would give up that lesser happiness. But as we're climbing this ladder, you know, certainly addictions it's very easy to see how those are very low rungs, but we don't yet have a solid hold on that next rung of just the joy of restraint, or the joy of not being addicted. So there comes a point when you're letting go of this lower rung to reach up to the next one, when you're kind of flailing, even no matter how far you are off the ground, you don't yet have a solid grasp on well-being. So you're flailing and not yet well established. But you can still see, like I could certainly living around our monasteries, we see, so many acts of beauty. We see you know, since we don't use money, every uh, gift of every calorie that we eat is a gift. So all of our bodies, our whole bodies, have been entirety a gift from other people. We're constantly associated with the best that a society has to offer in terms of people are on their best behavior when they come to a monastery. Hopefully, at least the monasteries that we're living at. And you see the beauty of generosity. You see the beauty, even if I'm not yet secure in my precepts, I can see Ajahn and his rectitude, what moral rectitude looks like. He's been practicing the precepts since before I was born. And it's just a solidity, it's not faked. He's living it, and I can see that. Anybody can see it when you live and are associated with Ajahn Pasano or a teacher like that. So even though I'm not yet firm, certainly early days moving to the monastery, firm in my precepts, um, I can see that it's useful. There is fruit. It is, and so yeah, having friends who are roughly where we are or a little bit better. The Buddha did praise associating with wise people and not fools, as we said earlier. Um, but yeah, the more you practice, it's just like these earlier rungs. Hopefully, all of us have some experience with the low down rungs, and have maybe given up some grosser form of addiction. I drank for a while and gave that up, and I smoked for a while and I gave that up, and had other unhealthy habits that I've given up to greater or lesser an extent, and I don't even think about smoking cigarettes anymore, ever. Whereas for a time, I was reaching for that next rung and was not yet solid in that, and it's like I was thinking about cigarettes all day. But this principle, it's like, okay, maybe it is possible, and other people have done it, and even though it's hard right now, maybe I can do it. And then you have to have this self-faith, which does grow as well. Like I've given up other things. Maybe I can give up this uh, food addiction, or maybe I can give up this internet addiction, or the more refined level of compulsions. The principle, maybe that applies, and you take it as a working hypothesis that it does. And maybe the happiness of samadhi is a real thing. Maybe the Buddha wasn't lying. Maybe the Kruba Ajahns weren't lying. Maybe my fellow practitioners, as they sit meditation, aren't faking it. And maybe I can trust my own, early tastes of the peace and happiness and pleasure of samadhi, and lean into that, and then getting better at that. So,
Sadhu. And just another question, Ajahn. I mean, throughout our discussion, I mean, I think you've touched a lot on some really important points in building a good practice, like faith,
mm,
and how that can lead to a sense of happiness, being around people who one has faith that they have actually achieved some of the things that one hopes for, can give this brightness to the mind. Avoiding being grim, too grim and too set on one's goals, and maybe checking in the mirror from time to time to make sure one's face isn't getting too contorted. But
yeah.
also having like some kind of method or some kind of schedule by which to judge one's progress. And then
Mm,
I think finally what we've been talking about is the importance of building like a cascade of well-being, putting all these things together so that the foundation of one's practice becomes joy in a sense, at least in part, and that joy can build and carry over into one's meditation. And I'm
mm,
just curious to get your input, joy and samadhi and faith and associating with good friends. I mean, these are all really important qualities. The quality that the Buddha tends to hold up as the foremost, as um, best exemplified by Venerable Sariputra, is discernment. And
mm,
so I'm curious, having built all of these qualities, how does one take discernment, bring that into one's practice, and try to use it to aim for more stable types of release?
mm. Yeah, good question. And thank you also for highlighting the good friendship, the Kalyanamitta spiritual friendship. And sometimes people will take a very narrow look at that word or that concept. By some people, I mean mostly probably Westerners, or might take that concept to only mean arhants or someone who's at least a sotapanna. Those are the only people who I should take as a kalyanamitta. But there are so many good qualities that I'm trying to develop, and so many people who are better than me at so many of them, that I love having my peer, like yourself and our other peer monks at our monastery. It's so important. Like, I don't know what level of awakening monks who are about my age or about my years in robes, what kind of attainments they have. And honestly, it's a little bit it's quite a bit secondary. It doesn't matter. There are so many good qualities that I would be smart to emulate and be around. So yeah, thanks for, I've enjoyed this interview, talking with you. Again, hope meet you in person. And in terms of discernment, yeah, living around monks who do that well. Again, Ajahn Lumpur Pasano is just fantastic at that. Um, yeah, his capacity for his moral intuition, his intuition about people, about situations. I mean, hopefully that would, it does. You watch somebody over time and you kind of pick up the ways that I've got somewhat, I haven't, it's not fully calibrated. He would be the first person to say this, but my internal Lumpur Pasano is not absolutely calibrated. But so much of the time, Ajahn Nisabo and I, as we're founding Clear Mountain Monastery, we are consulting our inner Lumpur Pasano. You know, this, what would Lumpur Pasano do? WWLPPD. You know, what would Lumpur Pasano do? Um, and yeah, I've got a somewhat of an internalized sense of that. And it's oftentimes not what I would do, or I would just be confused. Whereas if I can tap into this um, internal, almost avatar of wisdom in my mind, um, that's really helpful. And yeah, I will say that there are ways of practice. I mean, just recently, in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, have started listening to teachings from the Dzogchen Tibetan tradition, teachings on the Waking Up app, or teachings from the Chan tradition, which I do find helpful on the level of wisdom development, specific moves of mind, teachings of Lumpur Sumedho, actually. There have been times in my monastic life when I couldn't get my mind around Lumpur Sumedho. I found it confusing. Just be the knowing. Okay, what is that? How do you do that? You know, just not making sense. Whereas, yeah, there are ways to do that, to be the knowing. There are, you know, awareness calisthenics, awareness exercises of, you know, letting the mind drop back, or letting the vector of attention, rather than zooming forward, to just come back to the back of my body, you know, to go to a spacious, more spacious awareness, rather than just egoing all the time. And for me, that's a wisdom, it's a wisdom space. And it's a real thing to be able to shift into this space of knowing. It is kind of the ground of intuition. And, uh, you know, I still, you know, very much need to train in sustaining that, but it is a not self perception, an anatta sanya, a sunyata sanya, a perception of emptiness, which is less of a samadhi attainment and more of a um, glimpse, or a shift practice, where you kind of, um, it's almost like shifting the car into neutral, rather than downshifting as we do in our samadhi practice, paying attention to, you know, a very specific object with more and more subtlety. It's like, okay, coming back to that which is knowing that object. So rather than, you know, pointing and poking at a particular object, this is a subject-based awareness. And for me, that's somewhat analogous. Of course, you can develop wisdom with, you know, watching the breath or staying with the mantra, but coming back to that which is knowing. There is a there, and um, yeah, and listening to teachings from Lumpur Sumedho, or many other teachings. Lumpur Suchito can speak from that space quite well, and um, yeah, others as well. So
Thank you for sharing all of your insights on these things, Ajahn. And I really like the title of your book, The Cascade of Wellbeing.
mm.
I think a lot of people would like to have a cascade of well-being in their life, and given us some very practical tips on how to develop it. Especially, I think, through faith, like just hearing you talk about the Krupa Ajahns, your experience in Thailand, and me thinking back to what it's like to be around people like that and the beneficial effects that can cascade from that, um, especially how that can build into our lives in multiple ways. I appreciate you sharing your experience and your insights on how to develop these important qualities. So maybe what I'll do actually, I think Ajahn Kovilo, Ajahn Nisavo's YouTube channel, Clear Mountain Monastery Project, needs no introduction.
Mm.
I'm going to place a link to it at the bottom of the description of this video. And I'm also going to place some links to Ajahn Kovilo's books, The Cascade of
Mm.
Wellbeing and Thus Should You Train Yourself. And
Mm.
if anybody would like to get more involved with Clear Mountain Monastery, with their teachings, with their community, they have a website, clearmountainmonasteryproject.org. Is that right?
Uh,
Clearmountainmonastery.org.
ClearMountainMonastery.org. That's right. Yep.
So thank you
Yeah.
again, Ajahn, and I think we'll leave it there. Ko kakao.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Bante. And just one last thing, if you could also put a link to our interview with you, because it was so much of me talking, but we loved, Dr. Nisimo and I both were really touched and enjoyed our interview with you. And we've got other interviews, but everybody can start with that. If they've already known you, then if they haven't watched that, they should.
Thank you, Ajahn. And I hope that we
Yeah.
have more interviews in the future. We have the chance to learn more of your, get more of your insights.
Your channel is great. Yeah. Dhamma Vinaya Patipada. Sadhu.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ko kakao.